Hi guys, how you doing? My name is Antos, and today I want to talk about the GH4 camera. There's already been a lot of great reviews about the camera itself, so I'm not going to get into too much of the technical stuff and especially things like some technical kind of pixel peeping tests. What I did want to talk about is just the overall usability, especially if you're planning to get this camera for for film work or music videos, that kind of stuff, something more cinematic. Of course, the big headline with this camera is that it has 4K internally. It's one of I think the only DSLR cameras right now that can do that. It's a great feature, but at the same time, because of its micro four thirds image sensor, I know a lot of people have been holding back on trying out this camera, and I think the reason is because they're thinking they cannot get cinematic images, mainly because of like I said, the smaller image sensor. They think it doesn't allow them to produce that really nice sort of shallow depth of field kind of look. And if that is the reason why you've been holding out on this camera, then I'm here to tell you, forget about it. The camera, especially combined with some good lenses, produces amazing images, very cinematic, and not only that, but also the depth of field you can get is very, very narrow. Definitely just as narrow as what you can get with like a Canon 7D or even 5D Mark III. It just really comes down to the lenses and how you use the camera. So before I get into all the the good and bad things about the camera itself, I just wanted to show you some of the work that I had a chance to shoot with this camera for the last 2 months. First are these shots up here that I got at the dry lake bed just outside of Los Angeles for this short film project. I used the camera here for all these shots in the 1080p mode, so it's actually not 4K, but as you can see that even 1080p looks really nice and crisp. And also I used it all in the slow motion mode, so it's shooting at 96 frames per second. This camera is one of the only cameras really right now that one of the only DSLR cameras that produces actual real slow motion in camera, as opposed to, for example, shooting at say 60p, but then you having to go and convert the footage in your editing program to basically turn it into actual slow motion shots. I also got some shots again in 1080p and with the slow motion on Venice Beach in Los Angeles. Got some shots here of different skaters, and it worked really well, to really capture the different stunts and things that they were doing. And also got some nice shots up on the Hollywood Hills, kind of overlooking all of LA. And I even got some little performance shots for this music video I was doing for Jay Rice. And these ones are actually shot in 4K. And as you can see, there's just the crispness and just the detail, that the 4K image provides. Even when you downscale it to 1080p, it looks really beautiful. Now these shots you're looking at right now, they were done just after the sunset, and you'll probably notice right away a lot of grain in the image, and that's something like a main, I would say, complaint that I heard from people on the internet about the GH4 camera. And I came across this myself, and this was on the second, I believe, or third day of me using the camera. So I had not properly tested out the different settings and things like that, but I followed some bad advice I found online of basically how to set up the camera to kind of get the best image latitude, out of the sensor, and unfortunately those settings were really bad, and they're not really evident in well lit exposed footage. But when you actually look at these shots up here, you'll notice a lot of this grain gets produced, especially when you're shooting it in 1080p in slow motion. This does not mean though that you cannot shoot slow motion, like I said, footage in low light with this camera without getting this grain. This just simply means you got to be really you got to be careful on how you set up the settings in the camera. So since then I've actually had the chance to use the camera on many other different projects, and I found what I think are the best settings for getting the maximum latitude out of the camera, but also minimizing the noise. And as you'll see up here in these shots, this is just some shots here I got on the street with the GH4, just using the available light on the location. And as you can see here in these examples, the noise is pretty much non-existent. And here, just so that you can have something to compare it to, here's the same shots I got with the Canon 5D Mark III. And as you can see, the camera, the GH4 performs just as well as the Canon 5D Mark III. So right now, let me show you guys how I set up my GH4 to get the best quality out of the camera. Press the menu button to enter the menu. First you want to make sure that you go down to the setup menu, go to the right here, and we'll go all the way down to the system frequency. Now in system frequency, you will set this to cinema mode, this one. Depending where you bought the camera, it might be set either to NTSC or PAL. But we just care about cinema mode since we just want to shoot in 24 frames per second. Then we go back to the motion picture, and then for photo style, there's different styles. This is a standard one that you're gonna have when you start the camera, but you want to change this to Cine like D, and then you want to go down here and you want to adjust the contrast to -5. You just rotate this and until you have it to -5. Sharpness to -2. The noise reduction, leave it at 0. Saturation, you want to leave it at -2, and the hue, leave it at 0. And that's it. Next thing you want to go to is record format. You can record either in MOV or MP4. It doesn't really matter, so I prefer using MP4. Then record quality, that you can change in different ways, but this basically allows you to change between, you know, cinema 4K, 16:9 4K, or 1080p at 200 megabits per second, at 100 megabits per second, and at 50 megabits per second. Right now we'll just leave it in 4K cinema. For exposure mode, this is only for when you're in the video mode. You can select the manual, shutter priority, aperture priority, or P, which is pretty much automatic. So I always leave it in M. Next one is highlights and shadows, and many times I've seen people change different settings here, or like one of the presets or custom ones. Well, I'll tell you, leave it at standard, because otherwise you will introduce more noise into your video. So leave that at standard. The eye dynamic, also leave it at off. The eye resolution, also leave it at off. And then master pedestal, you want to enter and do it at +15. Then you go to luminance levels and you set it to the first one, which is 0 to 255. And that's it. Now here's a little function called synchro scan, which many people are not aware of. This basically allows you to, if you click it on, to change the frequency of your shutter. And what this is useful for is, for example, let's say you're recording a TV screen, or let's say you want doing some slow motion and you have different lights that flicker at different speeds. Well, you can adjust here the exact frequency of your shutter to basically eliminate that flicker. So what's so cool about the GH4? As I'm sure you've heard already, it records 4K footage. Now, it's not the only camera out there that does it, but it's the only DSLR, at least, that does it internally. And that's a pretty big deal. There's a lot of cameras out there, like I said, you can get an external recorder and do all that stuff, but that right away just increases the size of the camera and just makes it harder to work with the camera. Whereas having 4K internally recorded to a really great codec at 200 megabits per second is something that's really exciting about this camera. And especially when you consider that the camera itself is pretty small. You can combine it with some really nice micro four thirds lenses, which are just automatically a lot smaller and lighter than lenses for full frame cameras. Then you can have a really good sort of a camera package in a very small size, which allows you to really sort of go guerrilla style and get the kind of shots that you would not otherwise be able to get with some of these other bigger cameras. Also just makes it makes working with the camera a lot easier. As you can see up here, I'm able to hold 3 lenses that really it's pretty much all you would need to get all these shots that I got, for example, in these examples I showed you guys on the desert or here in Venice Beach, as well as all these music videos here that I shot. And I got all of these shots with just these 3 lenses, and these 3 lenses weigh less than one of my cinema lenses, and they also take up just about the same amount of space. Since then, I have actually bought my own GH4 camera, and I also got these Lumix G lenses. This is a 12 to 35 millimeter lens at f1.2.8, and it has a built-in image stabilization. And then here's another one, also Lumix G lens. This one's 35 to 100 millimeter f2.8, also has image stabilization built into it. So with these two lenses alone, I'm covering my focal length all the way from 12 millimeters to 100 millimeters. And that's pretty much where most of the shooting that I do, that's the kind of the focal range that I stay within. Especially also when you consider that, like I said, this camera uses the micro four thirds sensor, so it's a lot easier to get those longer shots. It's obviously makes it harder to get a wide angle shot simply because because of the cropped sensor size. But for the telephoto shots, it makes it easier. So the 100 millimeter lens, for example, will look more or less equivalent to a 200 millimeter lens on a 5D Mark III, for example. And that's another thing that I wanted to actually get into now, the image sensor size. A lot of times I hear people talking about it, that smaller image sensor means worse quality or whatever. It's just not as good, and I think it's just a big misconception, especially now. All these cameras that are coming out, doesn't matter whether they have a full frame sensor, APS size, or micro four thirds, or even smaller. The sensors in general right now are pretty good. So they produced a nice range of colors, latitude, all that stuff. And really what the image sensor is going to really dictate is just how much you could say you're cropping in on your image or your field of view. So you're not really sacrificing the quality there. And not only that, but if you actually look at the quality that this camera outputs in 4K, I would actually say it's way better than like the right now I would say the DSLR standard, which is the Canon 5D Mark III. The images out of this, when you compare it right next to the Canon 5D Mark III, I mean, they just look so much sharper and crisper that you almost makes it look like the 5D Mark III footage is out of focus or something. And that's also due to not only just the resolution, but also the much better compression that this camera allows you to record internally. Another thing about the sensor is that yes, it is I guess it's a smaller sensor, so you're cropping in, which means getting the wide angle shots is a little bit harder, meaning basically you have to get a much wider lenses or much smaller focal length. But on the other end though, if you're trying to get nice telephoto zoomed in shots, it actually makes it easier. So like I said, a 100 millimeter lens is going to look like a 200 millimeter on a full frame sensor. So it means basically that you don't need to get as big of a lens or as much of a zoom lens as you would need to get it on a full frame camera. Now for the wide angle shots, yes, like I said, you're going to have to go a little bit wider, but fortunately there's some really great lenses that Panasonic makes and a few other manufacturers for the micro four thirds sensor that produce really great looking shots. Here's a few shots that I got with this 14 millimeter, I believe, and this is an f2.5. And as you can see already with this lens, you can get nice shallow depth of field, but also very nice wide angle looking shots. Another thing that I hear many people talking about when it comes to the micro four thirds image sensor is that it's not as good in low light. And obviously it makes it harder when you have a smaller sensor and smaller basically pixels on the sensor itself to gather and basically collect as much light. So yes, it's going to make it a little bit harder, but if you're comparing this even to, like I said, to the 5D Mark III, this camera, I mean, just simply because the sensor itself, and that sensor technology has gotten so much more improved, it actually produces images that are really beautiful all the way up to, I would say, ISO 1600. Now, I myself, for professional work at least, I've never actually shot ever a shot higher than ISO 1600. So if you think you're going to be shooting stuff out there with ISO, I don't know, 6400 or something higher, which this camera actually can't even go higher than 6400, then I would say you're probably making some mistakes, and one of the big ones is probably like I said, whether you're using the way you're using the available light at the location or just basically you're not lighting your shots enough. So in my experience for film kind of work and music video work, like I said, 1600 ISO is pretty much the highest you'll go. But even there, I would say most of the shots that I get in low light would be ISO 400 or ISO 800. And this camera performs beautifully at ISO 400 or 800. So there's really no noise visible in there if you have the proper settings within the camera. Now, if you start comparing this camera to something like the new breed of cameras like the Sony A7S, which can record up to, believe it's like ISO 400,000, obviously this doesn't compare, but it's great that the camera itself, can get such, amazing images in these really extreme low light situations. But from practical, sort of point of view, when it comes to to film and like I said, music video work, you're never really going to be using that. For any kind of cinematic work, you're going to have to light your shots. So, you know, if you're looking for a camera to get some cinematic looking shots, like I said, the GH4, it can do it. Another thing that I really like about the camera is, like I said, just a small factor of the body, but also just the way that it's been designed, the body itself. It is a very sturdy, you know, built camera, and it's, you know, weather sealed to the point that, you know, like one time I was recording out there and it just started, you know, pouring like crazy, and the camera and the lenses got completely soaked. But, you know, as long as you're using also the weather sealed lenses, you're gonna be totally fine. And just, you know, got back in afterwards, wiped the camera, and it just keeps on working great. So that's a really great thing. You know, like I said, just allows you to work in more rugged sort of situations. The camera itself, as you can see, it's pretty small and light, and you know, at the same time though, because it is such a strong body, for example, and it has, you know, good attachment point to here on the bottom, I was able to basically using a little here adapter. And there's different adapters, so you can put let's say Canon or Nikon glass on it. This one is this little adapter that I got on Amazon for $14. There's another one that I tried that's just a little bit more maybe sturdy from BH Photo. Again, if you guys want all the links for all the lenses, adapters, and all that stuff that I mentioned here, just check out my website at tomantosfilms.com, or just click the first link in the description of this video. And anyways, with these little adapters, they allow you to use, you know, Canon glass. Now, obviously, these are not active, you know, adapters, meaning they do not transmit any electronic information from the camera to your lens. So if you have some electronic lenses that require you to change the aperture, let's say in the camera, or to focus it, or to activate the image stabilization, then that might not be the way to go. But if you have some cinema lenses, which is something that I always recommend in getting, then, you know, there's some really great cinema lenses from Canon or Bauer out there that are fully manual. They do not require any electronics in it, and they're, you know, really good lenses for basically film work or any kind of video work. So with those lenses, again, the great thing is that then you're going to save yourself money, whether you want to use them on the GH4, or let's say if you want to put them on like the Sony A7S, you just get these really cheap adapters for it. And once you put those bigger lenses on it, and you can then very easily convert this camera sort of to make it look kind of a little bit bigger, more impressive, especially once you put a cage around it, maybe a follow focus, matte backs, all that stuff. And you know, and sometimes I know that, as stupid as it sounds, that actually impresses some of the clients. Like many times I shoot a music video, and when I show up with these cameras, which are now, you know, as we can see, getting smaller and lighter, sometimes the client himself kind of starts doubting whether you can do the job. Even though, you know, I always have to remind them that, you know, yes, you know, you're the one who called me, you've seen my previous work, this is how I work. But sometimes I think, you know, just having, like I said, building up the camera and making it sort of look bigger, more professional, just impresses the clients, and can also make your life easier when working, like I said, with bigger cinema lenses. Like I said, you can use the follow focus with it, things like that. Or if you want to attach another LCD monitor, attach it to the frame, the cage that goes around the camera. So those are some really great little, you know, accessories. But, you know, like I said, in case you want to just kind of run and gun it, just you on your own with the camera, then having the camera itself, you know, be very small yet rugged is always a big plus. Another thing I like about it is this flip out LCD. You know, you can pretty much rotate it any way you want. You can even kind of, you know, if you're recording yourself, you can see yourself up here. And then at the same time, it allows you to sort of fold away the screen, and so that here, you know, the screen is not visible and it doesn't get scratched if you're transporting it. It's a really good thing. The LCD screen here, it's, you know, just like in most of these cameras, it's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be as good as having a really good external monitor. But then again, it's there more just for you to frame the shots and kind of see, you know, just use the histogram and all that stuff to judge the exposure. But if you actually want to be able to, let's say, you know, see more of the detail, you know, of how your shot looks without having to attach any, you know, LCD loops or like those Zacuto, you know, accessories, then the good thing is that this camera has a built-in and a really good built-in EVF, you know, electronic viewfinder. So, you know, that comes right away with the camera. That's one of the pluses. Another thing you'll probably notice about the camera is that there's a lot of buttons here on the top here and on the side here, and even here another one on the right side. So there's a lot of buttons, and most of those buttons are fully customizable within the menu. And what that means is that you can really turn this camera into a proper working video camera. You know, After all, it is a DSLR, and so when you get the camera itself, it's going to be, I guess, more configured for working, for still photography. But since the camera menu allows you to fully customize these buttons, it's something that I haven't seen in many other cameras, and really makes your life a lot easier, especially when you consider that this camera has all the proper video functions that you would find in bigger sort of ENG cameras, things like peaking, histogram. It has proper audio controls. It has zoom in functions, so you can properly make sure you get the right focus in there. And all these functions, all these different things, you can customize it so you can access them easily within with the click of a button. Not only that, but if you, for example, run out of buttons, or if you just want to simply operate the camera remotely, the camera has built-in Wi-Fi, and you can very easily connect it to any mobile phone or tablet, and you can fully basically remotely operate the camera. Every setting pretty much the camera has, you can switch it using, like I said, a tablet or a smartphone, or you can also preview what the camera sees in near real time. There's a tiny bit of a delay, maybe like splits of a second, but it is good enough. Even when I was using the camera on my 3-axis digital camera stabilizer, I was able to walk with it and really do all my shot framing, like I said, using my smartphone. So that's something that's really cool to have right in the camera. It just simply means that you pretty much don't need a wireless video system. You can just use, like I said, your tablet or your phone. I even used that function when I was getting some crane shots with this. So instead of bothering again, hooking up my whole wireless video system, I just grabbed my phone and I was right away able to stop the camera, even set the focus and all that stuff directly from my phone. Really cool function. And now more on the insides of the camera. Aside from this great image sensor which produces 4K video, what's really cool too is that the camera allows you to record to a really good quality codec. Internally, it records on 8-bit 400 compression, but it's a really great compression, especially when you consider that you're recording at 4K. So when you downscale it to 1080p, I mean, if there are any artifacts in it, which I myself have not seen, they're pretty much non-visible at 1080p. So that's a great thing. Same thing actually with the noise. If, any kind of noise of 4K, once you downscale it to 1080p, it's a lot less visible. But the cool thing is that a camera actually allows you to change the compression ratio, and you can record all the way up to 200 megabits per second, which is a really good thing to have in a camera. And actually, there aren't many cameras out there right now, especially DSLRs, that can record such good image quality. And in fact, I know some people are comparing this to like the Sony A7S compression, and in my experience, I think this camera actually has much better compression and basically produces video with much less video artifacts. Now, aside from that, the camera can actually output uncompressed 10-bit 4:2 video feed, and it can do so just using the micro HDMI that's built into it. Or you can also get an expensive base. Personally, I don't see having the sense of that base, but it allows you to have proper SDI outputs along with XLR microphone inputs, things like that. The only thing that I don't like personally about the base is the fact that the base itself is not powered from the batteries that are built into the camera. So you would actually have to get an XLR 12-volt power input in there, and that pretty much means you have to then invest in an external, like probably V-mount battery option, which then just makes the camera so much bigger and more robust. I guess like just more less comfortable to work with. That personally, I'd rather not go that route. I do like the fact that, like I said, the camera is pretty small. Now, if you're using the batteries that just come with the camera, the batteries, the built-in batteries in here, or the exchangeable batteries that the camera uses, are amazing. I mean, literally, I was, with two batteries, I'm able to work with this camera for a full day of shooting. So when it comes to the battery life itself, I think it's the best camera out there right now that I've used. So overall, like I said, great little camera that produces amazing images. Another really cool function that it has is, like I said, it has slow motion. Now, there are a lot of DSLRs out there that, like I said, they'll shoot 1080p footage at 60 frames per second, but it's not actually real slow motion, meaning when you record that footage, when you play it back, it just records at a regular, plays it back at regular speed. So you then got to go in your editing software and you got to convert the footage to turn it into actual slow motion, What's great about this camera is that it does it all internally, and it actually has real over or under cranking. What that means is that you can overcrank the camera all the way to 96 frames per second, which produces beautiful slow motion footage. It's only a 1080p though. It's not a 4K, but still the 1080p, you know, like I said, in this camera looks amazing. And then the amazing thing is that when you go to play it back right there in your monitor, you can actually see the right away the slow motion effect. So it really allows you to preview the shots properly and see whether your slow motion effect is working properly. Same thing if you want to undercrank it, meaning you want to record it a little bit slower and sort of speed up your action, which might be good for, let's say, some action sequences, things like that. Again, you can record it, you know, just adjust your frame rate and then play it back right away and see the effect right in the camera. A great option to have, you know, and it's really the only DSLR out there right now that can do that. Now, if you guys are not sure how to enable this slow motion function, so you can properly you know, adjust it, then just follow these steps up here. To access the slow motion, you can do it through your function button if you set them up properly, or you can also do it here through the menu. You go to motion picture menu, and here you go to variable frame rate. And in order to have this option though available, you have to make sure that in your record quality you are set to this one here, the 100 megabits per second 1080p setting. If you set it to any of the other settings, this variable frame option will be grayed out. So you set it to 100 megabits per second, and now I can enter it and I can turn it on or off or set it. I actually set my custom buttons, and the way I did it is so that I can easily access it without having to go through the menu, just by clicking my function button number 3, and I can easily change the frame rates here. As you can see, I can go all the way from 2 frames per second all the way up to 96 frames per second. Now, the last really cool function in here that I think a lot of people missed is the fact that the camera does time-lapse, but it does it all again internally. You do not need an external intervalometer like you would need with Canon DSLRs, for example. So a really cool thing to have. I don't know why other camera manufacturers haven't thought of that. I mean, it just makes sense. It's, you know, you have all the electronics in there, and you know, you should be able to just enable something like that in the menu, and that's what you can do here in this camera. Really great little option to have in there. And again, it's not an extra thing, or you don't have to buy anything extra, or even like with the Sony A7S, I know you can do it internally, but you have to pay for an extra app within the camera, which just to me does not make sense. So a really good thing that Panasonic has thought of, and like I said, just really makes this camera, you know, the sort of the ultimate package, I think. And I have actually since I having been able to try out the camera and getting the loaner from BH Photo, I've actually bought the camera. This is actually my own for myself, and this is now, I would say, like my A camera for when I do music videos, films, that kind of stuff. It's the number one camera for me to go to. You know, if I have a bigger budget and like I said, I can have a, you know, bigger crew, bigger support gear, then obviously I'll use like the Red Epic. But for, you know, for all these sort of quicker sort of you know, run and gun kind of productions, or just, you know, productions where I'm not able to hire a big crew, I want to have a small camera, light camera that can do, you know, amazing image quality, but that I can handle using it myself. And I think right now the GH4 is really the best option out there. Now, if you guys are holding back on the camera because of, like I said, the micro four thirds image sensor, or because you think it's not as good in low light as the Sony, let's say, A7S, which it obviously isn't, but then again, there is no other camera out there that's just as good, you know, in low light like the Sony A7S, then I would say, you know, for most shooting situations, like literally 99% of the stuff you're going to be shooting, especially if you're doing stuff that's, like I said, for film work, cinematic, you do not need a camera that's so low light, you know, sensitive. But, you know, if that's one thing that's sort of holding you back, I would say maybe save up money and buy this camera along with the Sony A7S instead of buying, let's say, an external recorder or other things. And I think with those two cameras, you'd be pretty much set for any kind of shooting situation out there. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to find out all the you know, information as to where you can buy all the different lenses that I used in the examples I showed you, you know, where to find the best deals, all the little accessories for it, you know, the lens adapters, all that stuff, then just go to my website, tomantosfilms.com, and I'll provide all the links and all the information there. Anyways, thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.